The 10 Commandments for Business Failure. Donald Keough served twice as the president and chief operating officer of Coca-Cola Company, dedicating 31 years to the organization. He also served on the boards of several prestigious organizations, including Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, McDonald's, and Heinz. This management classic is the only one jointly recommended by Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Jack Welch. Buffett even wrote an extensive foreword endorsing it. The book's unique strength lies in its focus on failure rather than success. The business world is constantly changing, and different types of companies follow different paths. Can a street vendor selling honey cakes use the same business methods as a Mercedes-Benz dealer? A computer company surely can't operate the same way as a baby food manufacturer. Therefore, there are no universal secrets to success. But what is universal? The causes of failure. Only by truly understanding and minimizing failure can we increase our chances of success. After 60-plus years in business, the author still feels discussing methods of success is beyond his capability. He can only share his experiences of failure, distilling management practices from his own career. The 10 Commandments are: 1. Avoiding all risks. 2. Being inflexible and set in your ways. 3. Isolating yourself completely. 4. Refusing to acknowledge mistakes and being arrogant. 5. Pursuing growth while ignoring business ethics. 6. Not thinking thoroughly and having incomplete understanding. 7. Relying entirely on experts instead of personal judgment. 8. Maintaining bureaucratic practices and bloated teams. 9. Having misaligned information and poor communication. 10. Fearing the future and maintaining a pessimistic outlook. These commandments can be divided into 4 categories. First, Commandments 1 to 3 address mindset. Second, Commandments 4 to 5 concern personal character. Third, Commandments 6 to 9 deal with information gathering. Fourth, Commandment 10 addresses attitude. Take Xerox as an example. They initially succeeded by taking a chance on Carlson's then unknown copying machine invention, making substantial profits. However, they later became complacent, even dismissing the prototype of personal computers as insignificant, ultimately leading to losses and layoffs. Intel, you've heard of them, right? Would you believe that in their early days, their main product was semiconductor memory? Surprising, isn't it? Where did all that memory business go? Well, that's quite an adventure story. Intel was initially thriving in the memory business, but in the early 1980s, Japanese semiconductor companies suddenly emerged and captured the market. Intel's performance kept declining, and they were facing potential doom. A risk-averse CEO might have stubbornly clung to the memory business, grinding away despite the losses. Fortunately, Intel's leader wasn't just anyone. It was the bold Andy Grove. One day in 1985, Grove walked into co-founder Gordon Moore's office and asked, "If we were fired and the board brought in a new CEO, what do you think would be their first move?" Moore replied, "They would exit the memory business." Grove pondered for a moment and said, "Then let's do it ourselves." This decision was incredibly painful. At the time, Intel was synonymous with semiconductor memory, like McDonald's is with hamburgers or Uber with ride-sharing. But we all know how this gamble turned out. If Grove had hesitated, clinging to past glory and avoiding risks, Intel probably wouldn't exist today. The author emphasizes that achieving long-term profitability requires short-term innovation. As Peter Drucker pointed out half a century ago, management's crucial task is to ensure the company's future through calculated risks using existing resources. The second type of rigid thinking is similar to the first, but with subtle differences. As author Keough notes, truly stubborn people not only avoid risks, but are also overconfident in their methods, believing they hold the secret to eternal success. But in the ever-changing business world, how can any formula remain effective for centuries? The author mentions Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Coca-Cola initially used 6.5-ounce green glass bottles. The bottle was as iconic to Coke as memory was to Intel. When Pepsi emerged, Coca-Cola dismissed them as copycats and refused to adapt. Consequently, Pepsi gained market share, forcing Coca-Cola to eventually launch 3 different bottle sizes. This pattern isn't unique to Coca-Cola. Many large companies face similar challenges. Take Nokia, for instance. Before the iPhone, Nokia was undisputedly the mobile phone leader. When the iPhone launched in 2007, Nokia's long-standing dominance led to arrogance. They clung to their outdated Symbian system, wavering between developing their own system and partnering with Microsoft. The outcome is well known. Their CEO's decisions almost seemed like a Microsoft plant in retrospect. Even when Google released the free Android system, Nokia stubbornly refused to change, persisting with their chosen path. Finally, in 2013, their mobile business was acquired by Microsoft. It's painful just thinking about it. As a leader, one must develop the habit of constant review and reflection. You must quickly adapt when circumstances change. Take the food vendor downstairs. They serve rice porridge in the morning, crepes in the evening, cold noodles in summer, and switch to hot pot in winter. You're probably familiar with such adaptability. The same principle applies to managing large companies. It's all about whether you're willing to face reality and make changes. After discussing risk aversion and rigid thinking, the third point about being self-contained is even more dangerous. The book mentions self-indulgence and arrogance. Isn't that just being overly self-satisfied? Such bosses won't listen to anything and don't want to hear anything, living in their own bubble. Anyone who dares to report company difficulties or point out their shortcomings will face their wrath. Author Keough describes a CEO who occupied a large suite alone, with thick glass doors at the entrance. Past the glass doors was the secretary's desk, and through another door was the actual office. Inside, there were exotic Brazilian art pieces, soft background music, scented candles, and a row of TV screens. Imagine trying to deliver bad news in such an environment. Wake up! The market doesn't care about anyone's self-image. Let me tell you about Kodak, a legacy company. Many people probably can't remember the last time they developed physical photos. It wasn't always like this. Kodak, primarily focused on film, once had annual sales of $19 billion and 145,000 employees worldwide. But here's the twist. Kodak actually invented the first digital camera. However, their executives, fixated on the massive profits from film, believed the world wouldn't change so quickly and wouldn't abandon traditional film. Their overconfidence made them ignore declining film sales. Their blind confidence and self-satisfaction sealed their fate as a has-been. Moving on to personal conduct, the second section is even more serious, completely off track. Such leaders will eventually drive their companies into the ground. The fourth point addresses leaders who refuse to admit mistakes and are short-sighted, the ostrich-like bosses. You can easily spot them by their catchphrase, "I'm never wrong." Everything is always someone else's fault. But who doesn't make mistakes? Recognizing and correcting errors prevents them from becoming major failures. Author Keough mentions Warren Buffett's unsuccessful investment in American Airlines. In 1989, Buffett purchased $358 million in American Airlines preferred stock. Unexpectedly, fierce price competition in the aviation industry, combined with Middle East tensions, turned the airline's profits into losses. They even had to sell aircraft to pay salaries. Though the situation improved by 1998 and Buffett's investment was saved, he never claimed it was a brilliant move. In his 1996 letter to shareholders, discussing the American Airlines investment, Buffett wrote, "A friend once asked me, 'Why can't you be smarter now that you're so rich?' Looking back at my poor investment decision in American Airlines, I think my friend had a point." Even the investment sage Buffett makes mistakes and admits them. Who could claim to be better than him? Is anyone truly infallible and mistake-free? As for the fifth type, they only pursue development while disregarding business ethics. Think of Lady Macbeth's ruthlessness and unscrupulous methods in Shakespeare's play. Her infamous quote perfectly summarizes this type of boss. The end justifies the means. But karma always comes back around. Lady Macbeth's tragic end perfectly illustrates the fate of such business leaders. Remember the melamine scandal? When it broke, the company immediately collapsed. Those responsible were fired, dismissed, or imprisoned. Worst of all, the entire domestic infant formula industry suffered. Parents began exclusively buying foreign formula, clearing shelves from Hong Kong to Holland to Australia. Trust is the essential nutrient for any company's long-term success. Once you lose the trust of your customers or employees, failure isn't far behind. The author particularly emphasizes that by any means necessary isn't just about business ethics. It's about personal principles. Life and work shouldn't have different moral standards. If you maintain different ethical standards in different situations, calling you a businessman would be too kind. You're more like a chameleon. Moving from mindset and character to information gathering, the 9th and 10th types focus on its importance. Unlike typical advice, the author emphasizes the need to critically analyze information rather than accepting everything at face value. Otherwise, several problems arise. 1. Information overload syndrome from excessive data intake. 2. Unprocessed data obscuring facts. 3. Lack of critical thinking, which can be foolish or even dangerous. The 6th type fails to think deeply and merely goes through the motions. The author specifically mentions Detroit's auto giants, who became complacent and set low standards, ignoring global automotive trends. Meanwhile, Japanese car companies kept improving, making Detroit's decline unsurprising. The 7th type blindly trusts experts, something quite familiar to many. The author cites Coca-Cola's consideration of changing its formula. Experts and customers initially praised the idea, claiming it would boost competitive advantage. After extensive expert consultations and market research, they launched New Coke. The result? Within weeks, they received 400,000 complaints via phone and email, faced protests, and encountered hostile customers. Some even began hoarding the original Coke. The public firmly rejected New Coke. The author concludes we shouldn't blindly welcome so-called experts. The 8th type suffers from bureaucratic bloat and inefficient teams. Many have experienced this. Trying to get help from administrative staff can be incredibly frustrating. They either pretend not to hear or claim nothing can be done. When the author became Coca-Cola's executive vice president, his secretary couldn't even get basic office supplies without extensive paperwork, and the person in charge of forms had already left for the day. It's an absolute deadlock. The 9th issue, misaligned information and poor communication, is one of the major diseases plaguing large corporations. For a long time, Coca-Cola was afraid to raise prices, fearing customers would stop buying and competitors would benefit. Eventually, when they couldn't hold out any longer as costs kept rising, they reluctantly increased the price by 20 cents. Jean Yao explains that while managers repeatedly advised against price increases, surprisingly, competitors who were also struggling immediately followed suit with their own price hikes. This shows how clinging to preconceptions can prevent us from hearing others' opinions and missing opportunities. Speaking of large companies making similar mistakes, let's look at Alibaba, a name everyone knows. In its early days, Alibaba stumbled through the 6th to 9th issues. In 1999, shortly after its founding, Alibaba became profitable and secured major investments from Goldman Sachs and SoftBank. With money in hand, Jack Ma began making big moves. He felt Hangzhou wasn't prestigious enough and decided to move the headquarters to the US and the domestic base to Shanghai. However, he hadn't carefully considered that Shanghai, while being an international financial center full of state-owned and foreign enterprises, didn't need Alibaba's services. In contrast, Hangzhou had numerous manufacturing businesses, Alibaba's core customers. This exemplified the 6th issue, lack of thorough consideration and half-baked understanding of what needed to be done. While relocating headquarters, Alibaba also began aggressive expansion, opening offices in China, Hong Kong, the US, Europe, and Korea. As Jack Ma said, once we had money, like everyone else, we hired executives, foreigners, vice presidents from Fortune 500 companies. We hired loads of people. Ma believed executive positions should only go to professional managers, the experts, thinking they knew more. This demonstrated the 7th issue, completely relying on experts without maintaining personal oversight. Then the Chinese internet winter hit. With money burning and little revenue, Alibaba was nearly finished. This was the 8th issue, bureaucratic bloat and organizational obesity. Fortunately, Ma and his executives woke up in time, confirming Hangzhou as headquarters and beginning massive layoffs. CEO Wei Mingxing acted decisively, flying to the U.S. on Chinese New Year's Day and reducing the American team from 30-plus engineers to just a CTO, one IT staff, and a part-time receptionist. Offices in Hong Kong, Beijing, and Shanghai were all closed, giving the company breathing room. Ma later reflected, "We removed many executives. It was like putting a Boeing 747 engine on a tractor. Instead of flying, it fell apart. If we hadn't performed this operation, Alibaba might have disappeared. Over a decade later, the 7 original founders who stayed with Alibaba have earned their high positions through merit. Even those who left hold senior positions in other companies. The highly paid experts proved unsuitable for Alibaba and departed. Of course, we shouldn't dismiss all experts. We need to judge carefully and avoid blind faith. As the saying goes, better to have no books than to believe everything in them. The same applies to experts. As for the 9th issue, misaligned information and poor communication. For large companies, it mainly refers to unclear positioning of core business, something Alibaba has only recently managed to overcome. Alibaba attempted to compete with WeChat by building a social network, aggressively promoting their messaging app, setting targets for employees, and offering digital red packets. However, it was too late. Their true strength lay in e-commerce and payment systems, and starting from scratch in social networking proved challenging. Fortunately, Alibaba quickly recognized this and refocused on their core strengths. If even Alibaba took such detours, other companies should take note. It's a dangerous trap because any business venture must be built on a clear understanding and grasp of reality. This deserves serious attention. Otherwise, your business ship could capsize at any moment. After discussing these specific failures, let's move to the 4th section about attitude, something that might seem abstract but is actually fundamental. As we've mentioned before, work and life are never separate. If our attitude isn't right, how can we expect to succeed? The 10th point discusses fear of the future and excessive pessimism. While I've emphasized the importance of taking risks, what's worse than avoiding risks is being paralyzed by fear. Fear binds your hands and feet, preventing you from taking action or risks. How can success be achieved in such a state? Have you ever participated in team building? Many include the classic high rope bridge challenge, a bridge set up 7 or 8 meters high with a gap of about 1 meter in the middle. Everyone must climb up and cross from one end to the other and back. When you first see the gap from below, it's terrifying. While climbing, you might curse whoever came up with this idea. Once at the top, fear can paralyze you. Even though you know you're secured with a safety harness, your feet refuse to move. That's fear binding you. The book discusses various ways to fail, but we shouldn't let fear of failure consume all our attention. Being terrified of the future guarantees failure. That's why the 11th point about losing passion for work and life is crucial. Optimism and passion are key factors in developing leadership and driving social progress. To maintain passion, focus on 4 aspects: customers, brand, employees, and dreams. Regular engagement with these elements will yield results beyond your expectations. This book reveals failure traps that anyone, businesses, managers, or individuals, might face. If you avoid risks, remain stubborn, become complacent, act arrogant, break rules, fail to reflect, rely entirely on experts and external consultants, embrace bureaucracy, communicate unclearly, and fear the future, failure is inevitable. But there's no need to worry. The author notes that many mistakes have temporary impacts and can be corrected with proper handling. Afterward, companies can not only survive but thrive for generations to come.